Let's talk about the BBC. Extraordinary emails have been revealed. The Sunday Times petitioned the BBC for emails and information surrounding the saga of the BBC's in-house paedophile Huw Edwards. What were executives saying, you know, as his shame unfolded? What happened after he was charged with child sex abuse offences? What we do know happened is when he was charged, about 3 executives knew, including the Director General, Tim Davie, and the Head of News, Deborah Turness. And Huw Edwards, for the next couple of months or so, 2-3 months, was continued to be fully paid. He got about 450 grand a year, so he got £200,000. He was paid by the BBC after these offences. Now, the BBC, when he got nicked, when he pleaded guilty to these offences, and by the way, another question is, why is he walking free, walking the streets, a child sex abuser, when Lucy Connolly, a young mum who her only offence was to write a few nasty words on Twitter, she's doing 31 months behind bars. I said 31 years. Trust me, in about 10 months, that'll be exactly what sentence you will get for nasty words on Twitter. Welcome to two-tier Britain's two-tier Keir's tyrannical Britain. But the desperation of these emails has now been revealed. The Sunday Times, of course, the secretive Beeb tried to stop the Times getting this information, but through the Freedom of Information Act, they finally succeeded. They got a load of emails, of many of them heavily redacted, but it does prove that the BBC has desperately been trying to get this 200 grand back from Huw Edwards, and guess what? He won't give it to them. So my question would be, why don't they sue him? Let's talk to someone who knows all about the BBC, ex-BBC presenter Adrian Mills. Welcome, Adrian.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Well, you know, if you look at these emails, but Deborah Turness, Head of News, is right in the middle of them. Tim Davie's involved as well. But there's an exchange between Deborah and Huw Edwards, in which, as I said, most of these emails are just black lines, you know, it's all redacted, typically. But this is there for all to see. It's Deborah saying, Huw, you indicated that you said that you were going to give us back this £200,000 that we paid you after the child sex abuse charges. Could you now do so, please? Guess what? He hasn't done it.
Yeah, it is quite extraordinary, because if you think about it, if it was you or I, and we'd been sort of suspended from our work for allegations and then found, say, not guilty, I would fully have expected to have been paid my salary while I was under investigation. If I was found guilty, then I would fully expect not to have received any remuneration from the BBC. And if I had, I would be paying it back. And had I decided not to pay it back, then I would expect the full force of the law and a prosecution to come back, because he has taken public money. And it's just extraordinary, the BBC, and that you think the BBC have got some very powerful lawyers in there, that they haven't gone after him. I don't get it.
That's my point, Adrian. You know, I can understand, you know, if you give me 200 grand and then you start saying I want it back, I might be reluctant to hand it back. I think I'll hang on to it if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So I think the BBC, with respect to the fact that they deal with public money, this is our money, this is TV licence pay money, they should play hardball. They should go for him with lawyers and say, if you don't give it back, we're going to sue your backside. Yeah. On this basis, you broke your contract.
Yes, very much so.
You brought the BBC into disrepute. Yeah,
completely, absolutely. And we all know, because of recent events, that if you bring the BBC into disrepute, they come down quite heavily on you nowadays. But what is extraordinary is the fact that he thinks he doesn't have to pay it back. And yet the indications within the emails that have been released, and let's bear in mind that an awful lot of that redaction, there could be some really damning evidence in there, is basically sort of hinting that, yes, you've more or less agreed that you would pay it back. It's not even a case of, you know, we're asking nicely. Yet again, it is another example of say one thing, do another. And I do wonder if the BBC are just hoping that actually this will just disappear in the ether of time and we'll all forget about it. Truth of the matter is, we won't. And the fact that Huw Edwards is a free man, when you think, as you so rightly said, some of the convictions that have been handed down over the last year or so have been so damning for crimes that are a quarter, a tenth, a hundredth of what he was accused of and found guilty of.
Exactly right. Also revealed in these emails was the fact that the BBC clearly, executives at the BBC, clearly dragged their heels about what we could frame as the Huw Edwards problem. So apparently, minutes before he was about to go into the dock at Westminster Magistrates Court and plead guilty to those child sex abuse offences, he had a huge cache of disgusting pictures, which is child sex abuse. You know, it doesn't matter, it's just pictures. You abuse, you inherently...
well, you're supposed to report the person that sent them to you, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, if you have pictures like that, you are complicit in the abuse of those children. It's as simple as that.
Very much so.
So he's a child sex abuser, and there's nothing worse than that. Now, the BBC sort of have tried to maintain, well, you know, we didn't know. Well, apparently in 2000, just before he went into the dock, minutes before, the Director General of the BBC received an email from an executive saying, I think you better know about this. We actually received a complaint about Huw Edwards' behaviour towards younger members of staff and younger men in 2012.
And did nothing about it.
Did nothing about it. What is wrong with that organisation? Why can't you know? Well, you should know, Adrian.
Well, I worked there for what, 7, 8, 9 years.
Yeah.
It's vast. And it's become so huge and enormous that it's very difficult to maintain and control, you know, who you have working for you. I would say, though, that actually because of his high profile and because it is the BBC, that I suspect his crime may have come to light if it had worked for another organisation which has not got the same profile as the BBC, and him being on television all the time, he may well have gone completely undetected for many years and may still be out there. So there is one thing to be said about that BBC investigation, is that they dragged their feet, but we've had this conversation before. I've had it on this programme many times before. It's yet again another name thrown into the mishmash of people that seem to be higher, way above the law in terms of regulation by the BBC and the law in the country itself.
Exactly right. And culturally, this is the problem with the BBC. Tim Davie is trying to divest the BBC of this syndrome. You know all about this. It is the way that organisation absolutely venerates, beatifies anyone who's on screen, anyone who talks into a microphone. I know when I used to do a lot of work at the BBC, you know, always as a sort of honoured guest and all that kind of stuff, I used to sit outside these studios and some sort of young assistant producer will come out and say, "Are you the talent?"
Yes.
I go like this. What? So that's what they call anyone who talks into a microphone or presents a TV show, and that feeds into their attitude towards their famous stars. They venerate them and they let them get away with murder.
There's a huge deference to them.
Almost literally.
Yeah, and I saw it in my time when I worked at the BBC, that if you were on-screen talent, which is a word that apparently the BBC have now tried to ban, you know, you're not classed as a performer, that if you were on screen, you got away with a lot more than if you weren't. And I know of stories, I've heard stories, I've seen things, and you think, you're only getting away with that because you're a presenter. I've seen outrageous behaviour just in the way people have talked to others, the way they've sort of responded to others. And I go, wow, I can't believe that you, because of your persona, think you can get away with this. I'm not so sure in the general terms that so many of them would get away with it nowadays. But when it does come to those individuals that are big earners, and you know the 3 or 4 that I'm thinking about, that the BBC are terrified because when you look at how TV is going, certainly, you know, broadcast media, we've seen ITV cutting back with all their broadcasting, that the BBC don't want to lose their on-screen talent, no matter what they get up to. And they really have to be so badly behaved for them to get the push eventually.
Yeah, we'll come to the Lineker moment in just a minute or so, because we need to discuss him. He is symptomatic of exactly what we're talking about. A big star who got away with awful things at the BBC, too terrified to stand up to him. But I've got a personal story about the way the BBC treats its staff and its stars, and it's about Huw Edwards. It's a friend of mine. It's a friend of mine, young friend, a guy, good-looking young man. And this would date back, I would suggest, about 7 or 8 years, something like that, maybe a little less. And he suddenly started to receive lots of emails, texts, pictures from one Huw Edwards. I've seen you across the newsroom. Do you fancy a drink? Da 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 da. My friend is gay, but he wasn't at all keen on Huw Edwards' attentions, and frankly, Huw Edwards, in that respect, was egregiously abusing his position. Big, powerful star, you know, trying to inveigle a much more junior member of staff into some kind of uncompromising relationship. So in the end, my friend, he kept saying, "Huw, can you stop this? Can you stop?" And he wouldn't. So in the end, my friend, in desperation, went to HR. As I say, I couldn't quite put this, but probably 6 years ago, something like that.
Career limiting, yes.
And HR said to him, "Well, it's Huw Edwards. He's a very important man. Are you sure you want to pursue this?" Yeah. That sums up the BBC's attitude, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And I've heard that before. I was aware of somebody, a presenter, who stuck their tongue in a young researcher's ear. She complained, and that young researcher was dragged into the editor's office, and then the person involved was called in, and it was said, "Can you tell her what you've told me?" What do you mean? "Oh, well, can you repeat the allegations?" So this poor girl, 19, 20 years old, left in tears, and she left the BBC shortly after. And that person continued to work for the BBC. And I expressed my horror at the time, but this was in like sort of the late 80s, early 90s. Nothing happened other than a quick rap across the knuckles. And I suspect, isn't it interesting though as well, they're all men. You don't hear about women behaving like this. And I just find it quite extraordinary that time and time again, men lose their moral compass. They then think that they can abuse and behave in any way they wish because they are the talent, as you so mentioned.
Yeah. And last point, I'd love to talk about Gary Lineker a tad. Now, the point is, I blame the BBC for this. There's a sad side to this. I always say, I'll listen to Gary Lineker talking about football all day long. And frankly, in a private conversation, I'd be interested to hear his personal opinions about politics or whatever. But I don't think he should have advertised them all over social media. But by indulging this guy, by letting him get away with what they shouldn't have let him get away with, they should never have let him make all these tweets, it came to this pretty pass where he ends up sharing a blatantly anti-Semitic Instagram post, says that he didn't really understand that rat imagery was Nazi anti-Semitism.
For an intelligent man, I find that extraordinary.
Yeah, I'll tell you this, Adrian, I've said it a minute, I just don't believe him. I think he's lying. This is a guy, 2 days before he shared that post, gave an interview to the Daily Telegraph saying it's very important to know your history. So I don't believe him, but that's what he says, so we'll have to take that. But it is the BBC that has let him get away with this and away with it, to the point where he's pushed it, he's crossed the line, and now, you know, I blame him, of course, but I also blame the BBC. I think it's very sad that this excellent football presenter, really good at his job, is leaving the BBC after 26 years in disgrace under an anti-Semitic cloud. That's his fault, and it's the BBC's fault, and it's a damn shame.
That's a very good point, and I would agree with you on that. Time and time again, I've seen his tweets. Now, there is that rule that sort of says if you work as a broadcaster in the news and current affairs, you're not allowed to be doing anything like that. And his argument was always, well, I'm a sports presenter, but you've got millions of people following you. You are a representative of the BBC, and there are standards to be maintained. The problem here, as you so rightly say, is the BBC, rather than coming down on him very heavily, well, look what they did when they did come down on him heavily and they suspended him. Everybody else went, oh, my goodness me, I'd better step back and actually support Gary. I wonder if there weren't a few of them that were hoping they'd get the call and say, can you present Match of the Day tonight? On this occasion, though, the one thing I would disagree with is this absolute anger that he's being allowed to present his final Match of the Day on Saturday.
Are you okay with that? Because I'm not sure I am. I can see the argument, but, you know, I think he's crossed the anti-Semitic line.
Well, it's a head and heart number, isn't it? I get why, you know, he shouldn't be doing the World Cup and the FA Cup, and I just go, do you know something, 25 years of servant, let's work on the assumption, being magnanimous, that you did make a mistake, a dreadful mistake. This is the end of your career at the BBC. But you and I both know he's got a very successful podcasting company.
Oh, he's fine. No, I'm not going to worry about Gary's future.
I'm not shedding any tears, to be honest.
Yeah, the last thing that kind of worries me, Adrian, is the reason that he's got away with these tweets that are always against Israel. This one, undeniably anti-Semitic, we'll take his word for it that he didn't really know. But the leniency with which he's been treated, what worries me, emanates from an organisation that shares his views about Israel. The BBC, I'm afraid, has turned into an anti-Israel. Danny Cohen, the former head of BBC TV, obviously a Jewish guy, he says that even when he was there, he felt it was a palpably anti-Semitic organisation, and it looks like it's got worse. So Gary Lineker was indulged because so many people at the Beeb share his views.
People were scared to say anything because he's Gary Lineker, and he just goes back to the idol that you've built him up. And I'm afraid now is the time, the tall poppy syndrome, time for you to crash.
Yeah, and when he tweets again about Israel, no one's going to give a damn. But anyway, Adrian, fantastic to talk to you. Really good stuff. Come on again soon. Adrian Mills there, former BBC presenter, on this extraordinary story of Huw Edwards. Pay the money back. And if he won't pay that 200 grand back, BBC, come on, sue him. He broke your contract. He brought the organisation into disrepute. That's a breach of his contract. Sue him. Show some backbone for once in your spineless jellyfish lives, eh?